Are you finding it really hard to leave a narcissistic relationship, particularly if they're a covert narcissist? Keep watching and I'll explain. When you're with a covert narcissist, sometimes the abuse can be more subtle, or you can have longer stretches where things feel okay. The abuse might be things like niggling at you, or you know, little criticisms, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of emotional manipulation. But what can happen is you start to become desensitized to it because you're so used to it. That when something's really gradual, it never feels as bad, or it gives us time to adapt instead of somebody being just abusive immediately. Most of us wouldn't get into a relationship with someone who was presenting immediately as an abuser. We'd probably run the other way. However, if the person is love bombing us and they seem to be really interested, particularly if we have a history of getting involved with people who can't commit, who particularly people who have avoidant attachment styles, it can feel refreshing to end up with somebody who calls when they say they're going to call, or even if they're really calling a lot, it may, and we like them obviously, then it may not feel, especially if we don't understand the dynamic, we might feel wanted and special. And I have gone over that in my video about love bombing. If you haven't seen that one, it will help to fill that part in for you. So again, the reason why it is so difficult is that we fall into the comparison trap. So it's just this idea like, at least. Well, at least they're not hitting me. Well, at least he's not as bad as, Cindy's husband. At least he's not as bad as, the guy I saw on TV. Or, well, he doesn't even raise his voice. He talks really quietly. He's very calm. He's kind of shy. He seems sad. Maybe he's depressed. Oh, it's just it's the ADHD. It's just the ADHD. That's the reason why. Oh, if he could just get over his drinking. If he didn't drink so much, he'd be fine. Oh, if he didn't, if he didn't have these issues with his health. So you see how we find things. We find ways to make excuses, particularly if they invested a lot of time and energy into somebody. If we've been with them a really long time, maybe we're married, maybe even have children, it can be so difficult to extricate ourselves unless it's really extreme. So sometimes it takes something really extreme for someone to leave. But one thing that I always say to clients is, when you know, you know. There is a time where people just can't do another second. It can hit you out of anywhere, and you get to this point where, I'm done. I am so done. And then even if you can't physically leave at that time, you can at least start to strategize. You can plan. So you're starting to emotionally pull away, and maybe you've got one foot out the door and it's really just about financial stuff, or maybe it's because the kids are little, but you definitely have a plan to get out. And because the person might not be threatening, they may not be dangerous violently, you don't feel the urgency or the immediacy. And that's the other issue as well, is sometimes there isn't that immediacy. There isn't that sense of, I'm in danger, I have to get out. So again, just something to keep in mind, that it's still abuse. Anytime you're with somebody and you're walking on eggshells, you can't be honest. You have to watch what you say. You have to strategize. You have to manage them. You're working. You're always working. It's like you're the manager and you're managing a project. If you're doing those things, it's toxic. This is not healthy. In a healthy relationship, it's a give and take. You feel comfortable. You feel at ease. Imagine how you feel with your closest friend. Imagine how you feel with somebody that you just love spending time with. That's how it's supposed to be. And if you're feeling crappy about yourself, if you have to explain away the behavior, if you have to do the comparison thing, if you're making excuses, these are all signs this is not healthy, it's not sustainable, and you need to get out of this situation. your life will be so much better. It can sometimes be hard to visualize, and particularly when you've gotten so used to being with this person, it's hard to imagine your life without them. But I promise you, and again, I can speak from my own experience, that when I was married, particularly when my son was younger, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine leaving. What would that look like? And then when I did start to visualize, when I did get myself in a position, I started to almost look forward to it. And then when I left, I can honestly tell you, nothing was ever as bad and hasn't been since. Even the worst of it, even with the court stuff, even with custody stuff, even with all the stuff I had to go through, all that stress, that didn't even come close to the misery of being with this person. So I hope that maybe helps to inspire you a little bit, and just realize that it's toxic no matter what. Even if they're not violent, even if they're not hitting you, even if they're not yelling at you, it is still very bad for you mentally and physically. It shows up in people. Sometimes people get illnesses. The body works together. The body holds on to the trauma. It's all trauma. It doesn't have to be huge blowout fights. It can be the little, the digging, the scrape, like I talked about this in another video about how they take your identity away from you. They scrape away, they scrape away, they scrape away. And the longer you let this go on, the more you're going to lose yourself. So just remember, it gets so much better. Please don't compare. If you're unhappy, you have every right to walk away anytime. In fact, you don't even have to be with a narcissist to walk away from a relationship. You don't owe it to anyone to stay. If you're unhappy, life is too short. I'm not talking about the little, ins and outs of relationships that we go through and you're building a life together and mostly it's pretty good. And we're not talking about that. But again, you're probably not that person, because anyone who's probably come to this channel, you're in it like for the long haul. In fact, we tend to overcompensate, and I'll put myself in there because I've been through it. We tend to want to keep seeing the best, particularly if you're a very empathic person. You want to see the best in that person. You keep hoping by some miracle, maybe they'll change. Maybe things will get better. It's the trauma bond. Remember that. It is the trauma bond keeping you there. And the only way to break that bond is to remove yourself from that person, to heal, get therapy, get support. Obviously get legal advice if you're planning on leaving, particularly if you share property or your long-term partners, and particularly with children. And if you need to keep yourself safe, that's a whole other story. But mental safety is just as important. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.